Have you ever had to stand still while someone humiliated you just because they knew you couldn't afford to leave? Have you ever smiled through clenched teeth just to keep a job that barely paid the rent? She has, but not tonight. Because tonight, in a room full of power, porcelain, and people pretending not to see, one woman said one sentence. And the room stopped pretending. The wine glass rolled. The pianist froze. A billionaire in a navy suit sneered, and Nia Lambert stood there soaked in red, spine straight, voice low. You can buy the table, the wine, even the silence, but not me. If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or told to be grateful for being allowed in the room, this story is for you. Like, share, and subscribe, because what came next didn't just expose a man, it exposed a system that counted on our silence. But before the headlines, before the threats, before a stranger knocked on her door with an offer that could change everything, she was just another server in a starched apron. Let's go back to the night Maison Cybelle stopped serving shame and one woman rewrote the rules of power. Maison Cybelle isn't a place people come for food. It's a place to be seen where power wears linen suits. Women wear diamonds like wristwatches, and the smallest smirk can make or break a career. The walls are lined in deep green velvet. Italian crystal chandeliers shimmer like expensive constellations. And at Maison, even silence comes at a price. The servers, like Nia Lambert, are the ones who carry that weight night after night. That evening, the clock read 8:17 p.m. when the front doors swung open for the 12th time. But this entry was different. A hush rippled from the host stand, spreading just beneath the satin-covered tables. Clifford Ames, the notorious tech billionaire, strode in as though he'd invented the door. His gaze swept the room not for a table, but to assess its occupants. Seated to his left was another familiar face, Senator Malcolm Reeve, recently named one of the 50 legislators closest to money by business honor. Two imposing bodyguards in black suits and earpieces flanked them. Richard Harris, the evening manager, nearly dropped his iPad. Oh no, Clifford's here with company. At that moment, Nia Lambert was removing her gloves, ready to head home. Her shift was nearly over. The final 3 tables had paid, and she was just retrieving her coat, garlic butter still clinging to her fingertips from a salmon dish. Nia Harris called, and she turned. Emma's out stomach thing. I need you to take table 11, VIP, right now. Nia hesitated. Why not Chad or Maya? They're both swamped. It's Clifford Ames and a senator. Her blood went still. Clifford Ames, the man pilloried in the press for publicly admitting he didn't like working with anyone too black in upscale environments. The man who called diversity a marketing gimmick for places lacking genuine luxury. And now Nia, the only black server working tonight, was being sent to his table. Emma had conveniently fallen ill. Maison speak for, I don't want my LinkedIn ruined. Nia took a deep breath. She shrugged off her coat, slipped on her white gloves. Her heart didn't race. It thumped deeply and deliberately, like ancestral drums echoing in her veins. This was not the first time, but it might be the last time she'd choose silence. She stepped into the changing room, fluorescent lights casting exhaustion into every reflection. She faced the cracked mirror, a hairline imperfection distorting the reflection just enough to reveal the world's imbalance. She removed her amber hairpin and smoothed her bun, damp after 8 hours. She wiped her collar with a damp cloth, buttoned her cuffs, straightened her posture, steeled her eyes, calm, and ready for war. She had served CEOs and famous singers and even the Swiss consul's daughter, but never Clifford Ames. Never as the only black server in the room. When she stepped through those walnut double doors, Maison Cybelle inhaled power-echoed perfume, melding with leather and old French wine. Clifford sat upright, one leg crossed, swirling a glass of red as though appraising a rare auction piece, speaking to the senator in his low, theatrically boastful voice loud enough for 5 tables to overhear. Nia approached with her silver tray. She calculated each step as though walking a tightrope steady, unshaken. She stopped at the table and inclined her head, every inch the trained professional. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Nia, and I'll be your primary server tonight." Clifford turned. His eyes swept her from wrist to jaw, paused a beat at her skin tone, then he smiled a smile that said, "Polite enough, but I run this place." "Nia, that's a lovely name. Very classic. You speak so well, so articulate. I wouldn't have guessed." His words flowed as smoothly as white wine, but to Nia's ears, they cut like a razor. "You're so articulate." In other words, she sounded too refined to be expected. She smiled slightly, measuringly. "Thank you, sir. I try to speak as clearly as the menu reads." The senator cleared his throat, a polite interlude. Clifford tilted his head, amused eyes colder than before. At table 7, an older woman murmured to her husband as she watched Nia. "She's not the usual face here, is she?" Her husband said nothing, but he stared after Nia as though watching an unscheduled act. Maison Cybelle held its aristocratic composure clink of china. Polite laughter, but beneath the elegance surged an electric undercurrent. Its current was silent, but anyone who'd lived through its charge could feel it keenly. And Nia, holding that tray, felt it in her spine. Clifford swirled his red wine as though testing its veneer, the ruby liquid catching chandelier light like staged blood. Nia had just placed his appetizer and politely asked, "Would you like me to summon the sommelier for pairing suggestions, sir?" Clifford didn't look at her. He stared at his glass. Then it happened. With a gesture so casual it looked accidental, he tilted his wrist, sending the wine cascading across her pristine white sleeve. The stain bloomed like rich blood on cotton, dripping onto her cuff. The dining room froze. No laughter, no gasp, just the faint clink of the glass skidding off the table and resting on the marble floor. Silence stretched long pendulum still. A patron nearby reached for the manager but withdrew her hand. Nia didn't shout, didn't brush it off, didn't respond. Clifford inclined his head in a mock apology, as if someone spilled water on his own windowsill. "Well," he said, voice cool as ice in luxury, "accidents happen, especially around people who weren't trained to be here." His comment targeted her and he projected his voice so everyone heard, yet cunningly vague enough to claim plausible deniability. Nia bent down, not flustered, not rushed. She retrieved a white cloth from her apron and dabbed at the stain with deliberate care, kneeling gently so her gloved hand pressed softly and methodically, like someone who'd performed this ritual 1,000 times. The air around her was taut like the fragile ozone. Everyone detected the burn, but no one dared speak it. Clifford didn't look. He raised his shoulders, resumed speaking with the senator as though nothing had happened. When Nia rose, stain-dappled cloth in hand, she didn't bow her head. She looked Clifford in the eye, calm, not hostile, simply unyielding like stillness before a storm. And in that moment, a flicker flicked in Clifford's jaw. Her silence, her steady posture, her unwavering gaze was a warning not uttered. A closing act, but the prologue to a silent tremor no one realized had begun shaking the ground. Before Maison Cybelle existed, South Side Chicago was the whole world, no satin tablecloths, no fine wine, no sir or madam, just sweaty, dusty summers, car horns mixed with cheap ice cream calls, and kids playing soccer with old soda cans. Nia Lambert back then was a dark-skinned little girl with tiny braids, scraped knees, and eyes bright as an unhazed sunrise. She lived with her mom and big brother in a third-floor apartment with rusted fire escapes that creaked like a familiar song. Her mother, Inez, was a mobile hairstylist visiting 6 houses in a day, carrying her tools and sometimes Nia along. Every time she got paid in cash, she slipped some bills to her daughter. "Take this. Buy books, not candy. Books feed longer than snacks." Her brother, Daryl, 6 years older, was basketball crazy, smart but stolen by the system. When Nia was 9, Daryl was wrongfully arrested in a raid. They said the description matched. He wore a white shirt, black backpack, and he was black. 3 months later, he was released with no apology. No one even looked their mom in the eye when they brought him back. From that day on, Nia learned to tread lightly in a world that wasn't built for her, but she kept walking. She was the only kid in class with 2 library cards, one for school, one for city use. She loved Maya Angelou so much she learned Phenomenal Woman by heart, every line of Still I Rise. After school, she'd sit under an old oak in front of her building, reading aloud to neighborhood kids like a brown-skinned preacher sharing hope only the poor understand. One evening, after a long day's work, her mom and she sat sharing instant noodles from a single bowl broth so thin you could see the bottom. Her mother blew on her noodles and said, "Darlin', being rich doesn't need money. You just need to keep your head up even when they tell you to bow." Nia never forgot her mother's eyes, then not the eyes of someone defeated, but someone who knew failure intimately and refused to be defined by it. From that moment, Nia understood she could not fail, not because she feared hunger, but because people who'd been hungry all their lives had put every hope into her. So, when her scholarship envelope from Howard University arrived, she didn't open it in the living room, she carried it up to the rooftop, where the wind was strong enough to tousle her hair but not blow away her hopes. She placed her hand on the raised lettering office of admissions. Full ride scholarship. It was the first time she saw her name next to the word law and not in a cartoon or a joke. Her mother, standing at the bottom of the stairs, told neighbors, loud as breath, "My daughter is going to be a lawyer, not the desk-punching kind, but the kind that makes judges rethink the paperwork." Howard was a humble paradise of red brick and ancient corridors. The first time Nia stepped on campus, she walked slowly, as if she might shatter the dream with her worn-out shoes. Then she met Curtis Langford, tall, white, and carefully measured in speech. His mother was a law professor, his father a journalist. He dropped intersectionality into conversation effortlessly and once took Nia out for Ethiopian food because I want to learn your heritage. He wasn't from South Side, and that's what made Nia soften. For 2 years, they loved as though race and consequences didn't exist. They studied together in the library, argued ideas, made up with midnight poem emails. When Nia was 2 weeks late, Curtis held her in their dorm room and whispered, "Whatever happens, I'm here. We'll get through this together." 3 days later, he was gone. No message, no letter, no explanation, just an email. "I'm not ready for this. I'm sorry." Nia had studied for the LSAT, but nobody taught her how to face abandonment with a growing life inside her. She stood before a small clinic in West D.C., holding an appointment slip labeled Termination Consultation. It was raining not in sheets, but in fine sewing needle drops that pricked her shoulder 1 stitch at a time. Her hand rested on her belly small, but no longer empty. An old woman emerged silently and nodded at her. No words. Nia looked at the appointment note, tore it in two, neither hastily nor angrily. She didn't go in, because inside was a choice. Outside, through the storm, remained the promise her mother had taught. You don't need someone by your side if you can stand on your own. From lecture halls to dish sinks, some falls make no sound, but echo the rest of your life. When Nia left Howard, there was no graduation, no mortarboard, no degree, only a frayed tote bag filled with law books taped up, and a handmade pillow embroidered with "Still I Rise" crafted the night Curtis left. By day, she served in a Vietnamese bakery in East D, C, for 6 hours. In the afternoon, she babysat for a single mother food in exchange for her time. At night, she cleaned an office building under dim fluorescent lights that never quite revealed anyone's face. 3 jobs a day, 2 hands always wet, a dream running low. But each night, after putting her daughter, Amira, to bed, she'd switch on a yellow lamp and open those old law books. A whisper next to the hum of the fan. Tort law, res ipsa loquitur. Not to study, but to remind herself she once believed justice was tangible. Some nights, Amira would sleepily ask, "Mommy, what's justice?" Nia placed her hand on her daughter's forehead and replied, "It's the opposite of what most people settle for." 2 years later, with Amira old enough for daycare, Nia took a chance and interviewed at a local law firm. She wore a second-hand shirt ironed so stiff it nearly singed her wrists. Her resume showed just 2 years at Howard, a high GPA, and 3 letters of recommendation, 1 from a former professor, 1 from the office cleaner, and 1 from the single mother she babysat. Her interviewer, a white man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair, flipped through the sheets and said, "You don't have a degree, but this is compelling. So tell me, how would you fit into a corporate environment?" Nia smiled. "Steady, I believe my life has prepared me for conflict resolution and advocacy at every level." He nodded, then offered a thin smile and closed the interview gently. "You're very brave, but I'm afraid you're just not a cultural fit." Cultural fit, a polite way of saying, "We can't picture you here." Weeks later, she applied to Maison Cybelle, the famed French restaurant in Chicago. Nobody asked about her credentials. Nobody requested letters. A manager looked her up and down and simply asked, "You good with pressure?" She nodded. She got the job. Maison didn't need her dream. It only needed her steady hand to pour without spilling and a polite smile that never wavered. So Nia stepped into a world of white gloves, forced grins, and the hidden prejudice behind crystal glasses. Maison Cybelle has a very distinctive scent. Not the kind of luxury aroma that wealthy establishments use to proclaim their status. There is no sandalwood, no rare musk. The aroma here is more grounded, more mundane, and, in its own way, more honest garlic butter sizzling on a cast-iron skillet, wine bubbling gently into a deep red beef sauce, cheese oozing over handmade pasta. It is the smell of a dream reserved for those who can afford to eat it, yet one that demands others make sacrifices to prepare it. In that candlelit glow, soft laughter drifts like a carefully selected soundtrack. The scrape of chairs, the clink of glasses, the silky bon appetit from polished throats. But behind the half-inch thick stainless steel door leading to the kitchen lies another world shouts, sweat, and rigid hierarchies. Nia Lambert has worked at Maison for 18 months. She has not taken a single day off. Every morning she arrives 40 minutes before her colleagues to polish the silver trays, review that day's menu, and wipe down the handle of the wine room door. Every evening she stays 20 minutes later to ensure each table is laid with the proper linens. Every glass is perfectly aligned, and her own shoes are still dry enough for the walk home. In the restaurant's system, she is Section 3, standard rotation. That means she handles the tables closest to the kitchen, the last-minute reservations, the ones unlikely to tip well. All the golden-level tables where guests order wine by vintage instead of by name are reserved for Caroline, Chad, or Emma. She knows this. No one needs to spell it out. In the break room, Chad calls Emma M, Caroline Caro. They pat each other on the back, share energy bars, trade memes in a private group chat. And Nia. Can she cover my table? Tell her the dessert's up. Her. She. No name. No standing. Just a function with curly hair and a silver tray. No one hates her, but no one sees her as part of us. One evening, she was asked to set tables in the VIP section because Emma had left early. She laid out forks, glasses, knives, each exactly spaced to the millimeter, bent down to inspect the knife's placement when she heard footsteps behind her, and then that low, nasal-toned voice unmistakably French. Chef Lucien, the head chef. He stood there, arms folded, watching her work. Then he muttered to himself, but loud enough for her to hear. Elle est silencieuse, mais pas assez brillante pour les taches dorées. She is silent, but not bright enough for the golden floor. Nia did not turn around. She set down the final glass, nudged it into a perfect tilt no one else would notice, and walked straight into the kitchen. At Maison, no one ever says you don't measure up. They simply place people like her away from the warm, golden light where imported string jazz plays. They seat people like her at the table by the restroom and expect a smile as though she were serving a wedding at Versailles. The restaurant does not reject her. It simply puts her exactly where it believes she belongs. And so Nia carries on pouring wine without a tremble, smiling without excess, moving in near silence in a world where every smile is programmed and every beam of light is allotted like a privilege. Racism at Maison Cybelle does not stomp in boots or shout in your face. It wears soft leather shoes, gives off a faint perfume, and speaks politely. It knows exactly which words to choose, at precisely the right moment, and can always justify every wound it inflicts. One Friday evening, during the dinner rush, Nia stood behind the small bar in the service area, polishing a tray. The thin partition next to her separated her from Emma, whose sharp whisper drifted through. I swear, I'm not trying to be mean, but this whole diversity push feels fake. It's just branding. Chad, opening the fridge for juice, chuckled softly. Relax. She won't last. They never do. It's too much pressure for someone who doesn't fit. No need for names. They. In a team with only one black woman, it is clear who they are. Nia gripped the tray handle a little tighter, not angry, not surprised. Just a soft exhale she heard herself make and swallowed. The next night, at table 14, a regular couple ordering appetizers, Nia approached with menu in hand, smiling politely. Bonsoir, and welcome back to Maison Cybelle. Tonight's special is a pan-seared duck breast with... The man cut her off, hand raised as though waving down the nearest flight attendant. Excuse me, could we have someone more familiar with Bordeaux? We want pairing recommendations, not script reading. His wife looked down at her Louis Vuitton napkin as though afraid her eyes might touch something unclean. Nia nodded, expressionless. Of course, sir. I will inform the sommelier. She stepped back and walked toward the wine station. Each step felt like a small stab in her back, but no one saw the blood. That night, after the guests had left, Nia did not go home. She stayed in the storage room, where the weak yellow light sifted through rows of champagne crates. She took out her phone and pulled up the entire list of Bordeaux wines on Maison's menu. She noted each chateau, region, vintage, grape variety, tannin level, and recommended pairing. She did not do it to overcome prejudice. She did it because she refused to let anyone be right about the limits they placed on her. She even practiced the French pronunciation. Pomerol, Saint-Emilion, Margaux. She read them like a student preparing for an oral exam because at Maison, serving at table 14 is a performance, and the audience is always ready to judge. No one saw Nia studying at 11 p.m. No one knew she printed a French-language menu at home and taped it to her kitchen cupboard, but next time a guest asked about Bordeaux, she would not shy away. She would look squarely and reply with a more flawless accent than Chef Lucien used when boasting about his native Bourgogne. Some people work for a paycheck. Nia steps into Maison Cybelle as though entering a battlefield trench. No armor, just her uniform. But before she puts it on each day, she performs her own rituals, the rituals of surviving in silence. Every morning at 6:30, when the sun is still shy behind the Chicago skyline, Nia is already awake. She fills a small spray bottle with filtered water, adds a few drops of lemon juice and a spoonful of apple cider vinegar. She mists her white collar and irons each crease slow, deliberate, as though the world will go off its axis if she falters. She polishes her shoes with an olive oil-soaked cloth until the leather reflects a blurred image of herself. They are old shoes, but immaculate, not merely for appearance, but to send a message. I arrive with a precision you do not expect. Once ready, she stands before the mirror and stares into her own eyes. She practices. Bonsoir, je m'appelle Nia. Bienvenue à Maison Cybelle. She repeats it 10 times until every French syllable becomes a second skin, polite, smooth, and unbreakable. Her daughter, Amira, 7 years old, bright-eyed with cloud-like curls, often sits at the breakfast table doodling on a napkin. Nia ties her hair back, kisses her forehead, and asks, "What's our rule before Mommy goes to work?" Amira looks up, a sleepy clarity in her voice. "I am brave, because Mommy never bowed." They repeat it like a mantra, not to be stronger than others, but to remember that even if the world forgets them, they will never forget themselves. Before leaving the house, Nia always pauses to touch an old framed photo by the stove. Her mother, Inez, wearing a floral blouse and smiling as though safeguarding something precious. When her mother died, Nia was a sophomore in college. She did not make it home in time. She did not see her mother's face, but her mother's last words, scribbled on a scrap of paper hidden inside a thin Bible. Remain. Being human is easy. Staying clean at heart is the hard part. Nia whispers those words each time she prepares for a shift. Not because Maison Cybelle is dirty, it is pristine to the point of frost. But the filth is in the condescension, the strangeness of being called she, the backhanded compliment she's articulate, sweet on the surface yet loaded with judgment. And with every step from the train station to the restaurant door, tray in hand, lips ready to smile, Nia carries her mother, her daughter, and a silent promise. I am here, and I will not bow. Maison Cybelle always keeps its rhythm. Whether it's Christmas Eve or a bleak Monday afternoon, every staff member's steps are choreographed. Everything is programmed: who greets guests, who brings wine, who smiles at just the right angle. But that evening, at 7:42 p.m., the rhythm broke. The revolving door at the entrance swung open, and the person who stepped inside was not a regular. Clifford Ames had returned. He walked as though no one needed to make way, as if every tile had been laid to welcome his footsteps. But this time, he did not come alone. Beside him stood a man half a head shorter, wearing a deep blue suit and the small badge of the state of Illinois. Senator Reuben Ferris, an establishment figure described by the press as leaning toward power over fairness, and choosing silence at precisely the right moments. Richard Harris, the evening manager, went pale when he saw the two of them. He turned back to the host stand and whispered into his radio. Madeleine Dupont, the owner of Maison, who rarely appeared, stepped out for exactly 1 minute, glanced toward Clifford, then withdrew without a word or a gesture. leaving the foyer to the self-styled king. When their names registered in the reservation system, the screen blazed Table 11, VIP, no substitutions, no photography. Richard looked around, said nothing, just a glance. And Chad, Emma, Caroline, they all understood. Emma, adjusting her hair in the mirror, went white when she saw Clifford Ames on the assignment board. She immediately set down her tray and whispered, "I can't tonight. My anxiety's terrible. I might throw up." No one asked questions. She vanished into the break room like she'd seen a ghost. Richard nodded softly. He didn't push. Chad, holding a menu, turned and shot Nia a glance. His look wasn't malicious, but it carried the same logic as releasing a goat into a lion's den and thinking, well, at least I'm not that goat. Nia didn't say anything. She was adjusting the tablecloth, folding it into the restaurant's signature inverted triangle, when she heard Richard's soft call, "Nia, can I see you for a second?" She turned and set her tray down. "Emma's out. Chad's got back-to-back. I need you to cover Table 11. She looked at the board, then at the name. Her heart didn't race, but another layer of silence settled inside her. "I understand," she replied, her voice as steady as ever. "I'll handle it." Clifford and the senator were already seated. The soft yellow light fell on the wine glass being filled. The table's surface reflected his eyes, sharp, deep, full of intent. Nia straightened her tie, took a breath, and stepped forward. This time, no one led her to the table. No one walked beside her. No one made eye contact. It was just her alone in that warm room, carrying every ritual she'd rehearsed, every gaze she'd endured, and a dignity no one had given her. She approached Table 11 with a flawless silver tray, hand steady, back straight, smile at the perfect level of warmth. She greeted them in flawless service industry French. "Bonsoir, monsieur. Welcome to Maison Cybelle. My name is Nia, and I'll be your server this evening." Clifford looked up. His gray eyes swept over her unhurried, not unkind, but with the curiosity of someone who already knew the answer. Then he inclined his head and smiled. The smile of someone who's seen this performance before and always wins. "Nia, is it? That's a lovely name. Very grounded." He leaned back, steepled his fingers, and continued. "You speak so clearly. Are you sure you didn't study in Boston?" His question sounded like a compliment but landed like a lead weight, silent, heavy, and aimed at no one in particular, so no one dared object. Senator Ferris forced a polite smile and adjusted his tie. He said nothing. Nia remained composed. "I attended Howard, sir." Clifford clicked his tongue softly. "Ah, Howard. Of course. They do emphasize presentation skills, don't they?" His words presentation skills implied she was trained to stand here and look just good enough to serve. Nia placed the menus on the table without interrupting, without hesitating. She turned to leave when Clifford spoke, his tone deceptively friendly. "You're a perfect example of what I like to call decorative competence, polished, pleasant, presentable, makes the place look good without making anyone uncomfortable." He wasn't speaking to her. He was speaking about her as if she were a luxury piece of furniture chosen to complement the decor. A polite laugh drifted from Table 13. An older gentleman smiled, then looked down at his menu as if nothing unusual had happened. But at Table 10, 3 meters away, a 50-year-old black woman in a caramel-colored coat and high bun stared at her napkin. She twisted the corner of the fabric, eyes unmoving, never looking at Nia, never looking at Clifford, only down, as though she, too, had once been Nia and had to stay silent for fear of losing her job, her opportunity, or her right to stand in a room like this. Nia caught that look for a heartbeat. A subtle nod passed between them. No one else noticed. And with that, Clifford had launched his first strike through a colonial-style magnanimity, a poisoned compliment, by labeling her dignity as decorative. And Nia, she did not retaliate. No need. Because she knew that sometimes silence is not fear. Silence is when you're calculating where your next blow will land. The 2012 Bordeaux was placed in a crystal glass like a ritual. Nia carefully swiveled the bottle, wiped the cork with a white linen cloth, held the pour at a 45-degree angle so gentle not a drop touched the rim. Every movement was textbook. Clifford stared at her hands. When the wine finally reached the fill line, he suddenly whispered soft as advice, but enough to hush the whole room. "You're shaking. Nervous to be here, aren't you?" His voice wasn't loud or harsh. It was just loud enough for the neighboring table to hear, just sweet enough that no one could accuse him of bad manners. Nia set the bottle down. No excuse, no smile. Just a slight nod not to confirm, but to refuse him the power to touch her emotions. A second later, Clifford turned to Senator Ferris and spoke clearly enough for the nearby staff to hear. "Do you ever wonder if they ask themselves whether they really belong here? It's like giving someone a paintbrush when they've only ever seen color through a window." The senator tittered and looked at his napkin, clearly uninterested in further discussion. Clifford beckoned Richard, who stood 3 tables away. Richard approached, his professional smile already a reflex. "Yes, Mr. Ames. How may I assist?" Clifford swirled his glass, not looking at Richard but at Nia, as if appraising an object. "I'd prefer a different server, preferably someone more appropriate for this section." Silence stretched 3 seconds. It was so still, the air itself seemed ashamed. Richard's hand tightened at his side, but his expression did not waver. "I'm afraid we're understaffed tonight, sir, and she's the best we have on tonight." Clifford's lips curled into a half-smile that wasn't quite a laugh. His gaze flicked from Richard to Nia, then settled on her cold as marble under the yellow light. "That's precisely what worries me." Nia did not flinch or bow her head. She folded the napkin in her hand into Maison's exact inverted triangle shape, a small, crisp fold, then placed it on the table. A tiny gesture, but for her, it was a flag of phony surrender. No one knew the storm raging inside her, but to them, she stood like a stone tower in a flood, unyielding, silent. Because she understood this was not a battle of words. It was a test of steadfastness. The main course was seared filet mignon with a red wine sauce and chanterelle mushrooms, presented on ivory white porcelain edged with a subtle gold rim. She carried the silver tray with both hands, balancing it as if it were a fragile wooden bridge between 2 worlds. Her left hand gripped the tray, her right rested on its rim to steady it. Every step across the dining room felt like traversing a gauntlet of icy stairs. And she was almost there, just 3 more steps. But Clifford had seen her approach, and this time, he did not wait for her to announce the dish. He did not wait for her to set the plate down. He spoke loud enough not only for the senator beside him, but for every table nearby to hear clearly. "You know," he said, swirling his wine glass as if reminiscing about golden days, "Maison Cybelle used to be a space of distinction. Refined, discerning, exclusive." He looked up, fixing his gaze on her. "Now I suppose even janitors get to serve filet mignon." Nia froze. Her hands still held the tray. The filet hovered in midair, and the room went still. Table 9, a pair of business people paused mid-cut. Table 6, a father and daughter turned. At the wine station, a young sommelier's knuckles whitened around the corkscrew. No one spoke, but every eye found the woman standing there, tray in hand, holding onto her dignity at the razor's edge between silence and insult. Nia said nothing. Her hands did not shake. Her chin did not drop. Only a single drop of liquid, clear as glass, slipped from her brow, landing on the silver tray with a sound so faint only she could hear it. Not sweat. It was emotion caught in her throat. She blinked once, very slowly, not from fatigue, but to keep tears from spilling. For if a tear fell now, it would speak for her, and she wasn't ready for that silence to speak in her stead. Clifford looked away, offered a thin smile, and turned to the senator as if sharing a private joke, but he knew the entire room was listening. And Nia knew that too. She knew every gaze was waiting to see. Would she bow her head, leave the table, cry, or what would she do? And she knew that if anything were to be said, it had to come from her. The air in Maison Cybelle felt so thick you could slice the tension with a dinner knife. Nia remained still, tray in hand. Her heart didn't race, but it pulsed deep, very deep, as if gathering force to push her toward the irreversible. She looked down at the filet mignon, still steaming, the dark sauce rippling under the light like a restless lake, but it was she who was rippling. In her mind echoed voices not from Maison, but from her tiny South Side apartment kitchen. Her daughter, Amira, working on a history assignment, sketching Rosa Parks. Yesterday, Amira asked, why didn't Rosa yell when they told her to move? And Nia, tying her daughter's hair, replied, because bravery doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes the quietest no is the loudest. She inhaled slowly, deeply. She heard herself in that breath, and for the first time this evening, she placed herself on the scales of truth. Not to claim victory, but not to lose herself. Nia stepped forward a half-pace. She gently set the filet mignon on the table with a soft touch, then released the tray as if letting go of a lifetime of endurance. She stood tall, didn't retreat, didn't strain. She simply stood, as if her mere presence compelled everyone to look again. She spoke not loudly, not softly, but clearly enough to make a wine glass tremble. Sir, I was not born to serve you, but I was raised to respect myself. No one moved, no one murmured, no one chewed. A glass at table 8 clinked against its plate when the woman there dropped her hand, its ting like a broken whisper across the room. In the corner, a 10-year-old girl looked at her mother and whispered, "Did you hear that?" Her mother didn't answer, only placed her hand over her daughter's, as if sealing that moment with touch. The room almost held its breath, and in that silence, no one, not even Clifford Ames, spoke a word, for they all knew the wind had shifted. Clifford Ames raised one eyebrow just a fraction as if he'd heard an unfamiliar sound in his domain. "Excuse me," his voice was measured, but edged, not loud, yet unmistakable. Nia did not repeat herself. She met his gaze unafraid, not defiant, her eyes like a freshly polished mirror. Then, each word fell light, yet heavier than any threat. "You may own buildings, sir, but you don't own dignity, especially not mine." A moment of stillness yet charged with electricity. At table 6, a silver-haired man blinked. At table 9, the woman in black laid down her knife slowly. Then soft applause. Just 2 quiet claps from the table by the window, where a middle-aged woman sat alone, holding her wine glass, eyes fixed on Nia. Then a second from a bespectacled young man at table 2 still clutching his menu. Then a third, fourth. No one shouted. No one stood. They simply applauded quietly, but resolutely, as though they had witnessed something they once thought impossible. Clifford did not move, his face drained not from shame, but from unfamiliar loss of control. His lips pressed together, ready to retort, but in that instant, the soft blue glow of a phone at table 13 flickered. A young woman, likely a student, held up her phone recording the scene. No one noticed. No one objected. No one stopped her. The storm began quietly, as all great things do. Nia didn't know if she was being filmed. She didn't need to, for that moment wasn't meant to be posted. It was liberation, a line drawn between enduring and standing up. And though her heart still pounded and her palms remained cold, the small smile on her lips had returned. Not from triumph, but because, for the first time, she refused to let him choose how the story ended. The first video was posted to TikTok at 10:23 p.m., just 2 hours after Nia spoke the words. "You may own buildings, sir, but you don't own dignity, especially not mine." It was uploaded by a 21-year-old communications student sitting at table 13, tucked in the far left corner of the room. She said nothing in the video, no music, just 3 lines of caption. Maison Cybelle. Friday night. He thought she'd stay quiet. #NotYourServerGirl. Less than 4 hours later, the video had racked up 2.1 million views. By morning, Nia's words had been stitched into over 600 TikTok duets. One creator paired her quote with footage of Rosa Parks. Another added Beyoncé's Freedom as background music. A popular TikToker dubbed their voice over the scene. She didn't just serve steak, she served a whole generation's frustration medium rare, on a silver tray. On Instagram, Reels, Black activists began resharing the original clip with the caption, "Dignity is not a garnish, it's the whole damn plate." On Twitter, the hashtag #NotYourServerGirl skyrocketed into the national top 3 trending topics in under 18 hours. And then, the mainstream media stepped in. Headlines from online news sites, podcasts, and morning shows flooded in. Who is the woman who just told off a billionaire, and why are millions cheering? From server to symbol, the quiet uprising of Nia Lambert. An independent group of journalists immediately began digging into Clifford Ames's past remarks. And they weren't hard to find. In a 2017 interview with a business magazine, he'd said, "Diversity initiatives are like buffet lines, too many options, and not enough quality." In 2019, he came under fire for stating at a closed conference, "Some people are born to build. Some are born to serve. The market decides, not emotion." Those quotes had once passed like salty breezes. Now, they stank. A media-focused Twitter account posted this analysis. What makes this moment viral isn't just the insult, it's the calm, the composure. That sentence from Nia Lambert isn't just powerful, it's surgically precise. She didn't yell, she didn't plead, she reclaimed the narrative in 14 words. Clifford Ames, once considered unshakable in the world of tech investment, was now watching the tide pull out from under him. His PR team rushed to release a statement. Mr. Ames deeply regrets that his words were taken out of context during a private dinner. He has always supported diversity through merit-based initiatives. That line was shredded in the comment sections. Merit. She handled herself with more grace than you ever paid for. If Dignity had an IPO, she'd be the only one we're investing in. Within 48 hours, Nia, who didn't even use Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram, had become an unofficial icon. Not because she raised her voice, but because she refused to lower it into silence when everyone expected her to. Her sentence, "You don't own dignity, especially not mine," was no longer just a response in a restaurant. It had become a flame passed from hand to hand. On LinkedIn, Malik Henderson, a young black attorney recently promoted at a major Chicago law firm, posted a short message that resonated with millions. "My entire career, I stayed silent in firms like Clifford's. I changed my tone, trimmed my curls, smiled when I wanted to scream. Nia just spoke for all of us. And she didn't even raise her voice. The post was shared over 600,000 times in 2 days. The comments below weren't for Malik. They were thank yous poured out to a nameless waitress the world was suddenly desperate to know. On Facebook, the black woman who had been seated at table 10 that night, the one who looked down at her napkin, eyes burning, posted just one quiet sentence. I saw a black woman stand up with grace. She didn't flinch, didn't shout. She simply declared herself human, and I wept not because it was loud, but because it was true. Dozens of community pages reshared it, calling it the eyewitness that broke the silence. Then, organizations began speaking out. The National Restaurant Workers Alliance issued a statement. No worker should ever have to choose between a paycheck and their dignity. We stand with Nia Lambert. A nonprofit legal aid group that supports victims of public discrimination offered free legal counsel if Clifford dared to sue. Meanwhile, Clifford's PR team kept scrambling to stay ahead of social media. A second statement was released 72 hours after the incident. Mr. Ames believes in second chances and regrets any pain caused. He is donating $250,000 to diversity-focused organizations across the country. It took Twitter users less than 30 minutes to tear it apart. So he thinks $250K can buy dignity now. You threw wine. Now you're throwing money. Still not cleaning the mess. We don't want your charity. We want your silence. On YouTube, a viral video from a prominent communications professor broke it down clearly. What Clifford doesn't understand is this: the more he talks, the more control he loses. The story is no longer his to manage. The narrative belongs to Nia, and she's never even spoken to the press. Nia's silence, unintended, uncalculated, had become her weapon. She didn't post, didn't respond, didn't show up. And that made the public believe one thing even more deeply. She didn't need to prove anything. Because truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs to be said at the right moment. By Monday morning, the quiet apartment complex on the south side of Chicago wasn't so quiet anymore. Outside the third-floor unit where Nia and her daughter Amira had lived for 5 years, 3 reporters stood waiting, one from a local news station, one from a trending social blog, and one, unmarked, just a mic and a hungry gaze. When Nia cracked the door to grab the mail, a voice jumped out. Miss Lambert, just one question. Do you regret saying it? Was it premeditated or instinct? She closed the door, quietly, not rushed but definite. Inside, Amira was curled on the couch hugging a pillow, her eyes red. Mommy, can I not go to school today? Her voice trembled, not from cold, but because the night before, 2 strangers had rung the doorbell of her classmate's house, asking, "Is your friend the daughter of the server on the internet?" On Nia's voicemail, over 60 missed calls from national newspapers, TV producers, podcasts wanting to tell the story of the 21st century heroine. But Nia still silent. No posts, no replies, no shares, just deep breaths, 1 hour at a time. That night, with the door locked, curtains drawn, and living room lights off, she checked her messages. A number with no name, no photo, just 1 line of text. I didn't support you, but you made me question myself. E. No signature, but she knew. Emma. The one who'd walked away. The one who vanished when Clifford arrived. The one who saw but didn't stand. Nia put down the phone. She didn't reply. Instead, she opened a drawer beneath her mother's altar and pulled out a small recorder, one her mother, Inez, used back when she still dictated journal entries by voice, before she ever owned a smartphone. She hit play on the one recording. She always came back to a clip just over 12 seconds long. Her mother's voice slow, raspy, weathered by time. "My child, sometimes you don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to speak when no one else dares." The sound floated through the dark room. No music, no ticking clock. Just that voice and the breath of a woman holding herself together through a storm of praise, judgment, fear, and expectation. Nia closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to gather herself small as an ember, still warm, still burning, even if no one could see it. Because some fires don't need to be lit, they just need someone to come close enough to realize this is the kind you can't put out. For over a year, there were employees at Maison Cybelle who had never even heard Madeleine Dupont speak. She appeared as rarely as a living legend, silver haircut precisely, black silk robes, and a woodsy perfume so faint people often wondered if she existed only as a shadow in the restaurant's legacy. But tonight, after closing hours after the last guest had left, the tablecloths had been changed, and the candles blown out, she summoned everyone to the second-floor VIP room. Richard stood at the door, more serious than usual. Chad, Emma, Caroline, Maya, all present, and Nia, quietly seated in the last chair near the heavy velvet curtain, her hands still red from the tray that cracked her nail earlier that night. No one spoke, no whispering, no phones, just silence the kind that felt proper. Maison Cybelle. Silence. The door opened. Madeleine entered without her usual robe, without makeup, just a crisp white blouse, hair tied low, no jewelry. She looked at everyone. She didn't speak right away. Her gaze circled the room slowly, deliberately, as if committing each face of her so-called Cybelle family to memory. Then she spoke. Her voice, low, slightly trembling, but clear as glass just wiped. "I created Maison Cybelle to celebrate refinement, not to host refined cruelty." A breath caught at the back of the room. Maybe Emma. Richard looked down. Nia didn't move. Madeleine continued. "We've served presidents, poets, royalty, but last Friday night, we witnessed something far more important than any guest list. We saw a woman carry her dignity through fire, and we saw who tried to burn it." Silence. She pulled a small slip of paper from her blouse pocket, unfolded it, not to read, but to hold the weight of the decision like a ritual. As of tonight, Clifford Ames is permanently banned from Maison Cybelle, not as punishment, but because his presence insults what this house stands for. Someone inhaled sharply. Emma turned away, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. Chad nodded softly, like someone relearning something he'd once forgotten. Nia said nothing. She didn't cry. She simply placed both hands on her knees gently, as if lighting a silent thank you. Madeleine looked at her directly, for the first time. No avoidance. No detour. And then she said, without raising her voice, without theatrics, "Dignity is not a flavor we add to the dish. It is the plate we serve it on." That night, in a room that had hosted kings and cabinet members, true power finally spoke not through wealth, not through policy, but with a declaration so quiet it could not be undone. 3 days after Clifford Ames was banned from Maison Cybelle, a legal letter arrived in the restaurant's inbox. Boldface title, "Notice of Defamation and Financial Damages." Its tone was short, clean, written the way billionaires expect lawyers to write. Mr. Ames has suffered irreparable harm to his public image and business prospects due to the irresponsible and misleading public framing by Maison Cybelle and its employee, Miss Nia Lambert. We reserve the right to seek full damages, including loss of investor confidence, reputational injury, and emotional distress. Signed by a prestigious law firm, best known for cleaning up post-scandal PR disasters. Richard Harris received the letter during morning inventory. He handed it to Madeleine that same afternoon. She read it, placed it on the table like a misprinted menu, and poured herself tea. Said nothing. 12 hours later, Twitter exploded again. Not because of Nia, not because of Clifford, but because someone who had stayed silent that night decided they wouldn't anymore. Senator Reuben Ferris, the man who had sat beside Clifford at that fateful table, posted a single tweet. I sat silent during that moment. I will not stay silent again. I support Nia Lambert. Just 3 sentences. No photo. No video. But it hit like a thunderclap. Replies poured in like New Year's fireworks. About time someone in power admitted their silence. Now, this is what allyship looks like. It's one thing to clap after, it's another to say you should have clapped during. Within 2 days, a group of black investors in Chicago announced the creation of the Black Labor Legal Fund, a financial and legal defense fund for service workers facing discrimination or retaliation for telling the truth. Their statement read, If Clifford Ames wants to turn the law into a weapon, then we will turn the law into a shield. A local restaurant chain pledged $100,000 to the fund with this message. We may not have served Clifford Ames, but we know the kind of world we want to serve in. The lawsuit from Clifford's attorneys still sitting on their desk, unsigned, and no one dared put their name to it. Because every sentence in that letter was no longer just legal pressure, it was kerosene in a media firestorm Clifford couldn't control. Clifford, the man who once believed one phone call could get someone fired, now sat in a quiet room, and no one would answer his call. Because Nia didn't win with a lawsuit. She simply didn't bow. And sometimes, that's the only thing left that the world still believes in. That afternoon, sunlight filtered through the domed glass ceiling of Maison Cybelle more gently than usual. It no longer felt like a light that demanded elegance, just light warm enough to fall on faces that never thought they'd share a table. The staff meeting happened after lunch. No memos. No one was forced to come. They gathered because they needed to, not to work, but to witness something bigger than themselves. Nia sat in the corner, folding a white napkin like she did every day. No one asked her to be there. No one asked her to speak, but the sharpness had left the room. Every gaze, once judgmental, now simply waited, not from curiosity, but from respect. Madeleine Dupont entered. Same white shirt. No scent. No symbols. Only one thing different, her eyes were no longer cold. She looked directly at Nia, then walked toward her, not fast, not slow, just aware that every step would live in the memory of this room. She didn't address the group, she spoke only to Nia. You didn't just reclaim your dignity, you restored the soul of this house. No applause followed, none was needed. Just the stillness that everyone understood. What happened next left Nia once excluded from every break-room conversation speechless. Caroline, who once laughed behind her back for mispronouncing a wine name, stepped forward. She didn't say sorry. No excuses. She simply reached out her hand, eyes glistening. I used to think you were quiet. I see now. You were just listening. Chad, who once let her double shift without splitting tips, came next. He said nothing, just bowed his head, a little lower than usual as if to say, thank you. Emma was last. No makeup. Hair messy. She looked at Nia like someone who had just realized some people live at a depth she had never dared to enter. I wasn't brave, but you made it impossible to look away. Thank you. No one mentioned Clifford. No one brought up the lawsuit. For the first time, Maison Cybelle had no kings, no table one, no chairs for privilege. Only people and eyes that no longer measured worth in tears. That evening, as Nia exited the restaurant, a new hire ran after her with a folded napkin she'd forgotten. It still held the signature triangle crease required by Maison's standards. But this time, as Nia took it back, she knew it wasn't just her following the shape of the house. She had reshaped the house itself. Not with yelling, not with power, but with one sentence, one look, and a kind of strength no one can teach. Only those who've been overlooked can learn. Nia Lambert had never stood on a stage, not because she feared the spotlight, but because she never thought it would turn her way. But that morning, inside a large downtown auditorium, beneath a banner that read, "Voices of Labor Justice, 2025, Nia stood surrounded by whispers, camera lenses, and expectant eyes. She wore a blazer borrowed from a friend, still a little wide at the shoulders, sleeves falling just past her wrists. Her hair was pulled up neatly, no makeup, no stylist. Her hand held the mic, trembling like an unpaid bill. She looked down at the audience. Over 300 people, mostly women, black, brown, yellow, white, with the same gaze she once carried not so long ago. Some wore restaurant uniforms. Some had factory name tags. There were student interns, and even a mother bouncing a baby on her lap while listening to the opening speech. For a moment, Nia wanted to step back, not out of fear, but because the weight of expectation felt too heavy for someone who once only wanted to finish her evening shift in peace. Then she saw Amira, her daughter, sitting in the third row, wearing a blue bow, giving her a big thumbs up. And Nia knew she didn't need to perform. She just needed to speak, like she always had when no one listened. She took a breath, raised the mic, and began in the same steady voice she used at Maison Cybelle that night. "I am not here because I spoke loudly. I'm here because I finally spoke clearly." The room held its breath. Not from shock, but because truth, when spoken in a real voice, doesn't need volume to be powerful. She continued, "There are so many of us who've been told we're too quiet, too emotional, too unqualified, too angry, but really, we were just too human for a system that forgot how to listen. I didn't plan to become a moment, I just refused to become invisible again. And I believe no one should be told they don't belong while they're the ones holding the room together." At the end, she nodded softly. No theatrical bow. She wasn't performing. She was living. The crowd rose to their feet, not in unison, not on cue, but like empathy spreading, raindrops across smooth stone. 2 days later, LinkedIn named it the Speech of the Year. An online magazine wrote, "In a world shouting to be heard, Nia Lambert whispered and the whole country listened." After the speech, Nia didn't go home. She returned to her small South Side apartment, but not to retreat. To begin. Beneath the soft yellow kitchen light, the same table where her mother once clipped coupons and her daughter once learned to draw squares, Nia opened her laptop. She created a new email, registered a new domain, and launched an old idea, one that had quietly lived inside her for years. The name of the organization: Quiet Courage. No slogan, no long mission statement, just a single line of description. A space for those who served in silence and deserved to be heard. Within 2 weeks, Quiet Courage received over 400 submissions. From restaurant workers denied extra shifts for not fitting the vibe, from black prep cooks who were never allowed near the main kitchen, from bartenders called you people by guests and told by managers, "Don't take it personally." Quiet Courage didn't chant revolution. They taught skills. How to record legally in a hostile workplace. How to speak up against bias without losing your job. How to recognize microaggressions and respond with law. not rage. They connected workers with lawyers, HR experts, and even reformed former managers. Then came an email from Harlan and Bay, an upscale restaurant group in New York. "We've watched, we've listened, and we're changing. We'd like to invite you, Ms. Lambert, to join us as Director of Cross-Cultural Training." It wasn't the job title that made Nia pause, not the salary either. It was the responsibility and how they would see her. 3 weeks later, in a glass office building in Manhattan, Nia arrived to sign the contract. This time, the blazer wasn't borrowed, but her hands still trembled not from fear, but because this was no longer just about her. The hiring manager, an Asian woman with a deep voice and warm eyes, handed her the papers. Nia didn't pick up the pen right away. She looked her in the eye and asked, "Will I be seen? Or just shown?" The woman smiled, not rushed, not rehearsed. "Seen, loud and clear." With a gentle signature on the final line, Nia knew she was no longer the server balancing wine glasses. She was rebuilding the table so people like her would finally have a seat. That night, Maison Cybelle glowed like always. Candles flickered gold. Wine flowed from long-necked bottles. Soft jazz wrapped around the room like a silk scarf. But something had changed. Tonight, Nia Lambert returned. For the first time, not through the staff entrance. For the first time, no apron, no napkin folding, no memorized table numbers. She entered through the front door, light gray blazer, pencil skirt, low heels, not flashy, but enough to turn the heads of those who once barely glanced at her. Richard Harris met her at the entrance. He didn't say Nia. He didn't say Lambert. He placed a hand over his chest and nodded. "Welcome back. We saved your table." The one with the best light. She was led to the left corner of the room where the light slanted softest. The table once reserved for traditional guests. Now, the room no longer divided tables by skin color, only by those who had learned to truly see. As she sat down, a small voice came from her right. A 10-year-old girl braided hair, new Maison uniform, clearly a trainee, quietly observing how the grown-ups did it. She looked at Nia, shy but certain, and whispered, "You're her, the brave one." The words fell like awe, but also like a confirmation that everything had truly happened. Nia looked at her, didn't beam, didn't act victorious, just smiled a quiet smile that knew she hadn't done it for attention, but so others could find their own light. And she whispered back just loud enough for the girl to hear, but as if she were whispering to her younger self. "No, sweetie, I'm just someone who finally said no, and meant it." Outside, social media kept spinning, news kept writing, debates kept burning. But inside Maison Cybelle that evening, no power sat at the head of the table. Only courage being served the way it always deserved. And that's how a room gets rebuilt not with bricks, but with a sentence, a napkin fold, a glance, a silence held at the perfect time. A final table for the one who didn't flip it over but simply stood still and made the entire room sit down. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.